Thanks for coming out tonight. I know it's cold. I should also have told you that I'm actually from Canada, so I still don't fully understand people unwilling to come out in the cold. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my new book, but I'm also going to sort of talk about, this is my first time to San Diego doing an event. I usually just come down here for Comic-Con most of the time, because I'm a nerd. So I've never really got to tell San Diego the story of the blog and the book and all the crazy stuff that's happened in the last couple of years. And then I'll get into a little bit of the new book. So the new book is The Regional Guide to White People, and I don't know if I should... it's regional. I don't know if I should apologize to San Diego or ask for a thank you that you are not included in the regional area. But I guarantee you'll be able to find some of yourself in here just walking around La Jolla. Oh my god. Like, this is like if the white people I wrote about got a little more money. This is incredible. Every store is like independently owned, or like an interior decoration store, or like a fancy pet shop down the street. I mean, I was admiring many tiles as I was walking around today. So well done. Very impressed. And then like the farm to table restaurants everywhere. It is fantastic. So, probably should have found its way into the book, and I apologize for that. So, the story of stuff white people like is actually a very, very interesting one. It's a long one, and it's kind of a story for anyone here who's ever dreamed about becoming a writer and failing at it. And this is sort of one of those amazing stories of redemption. So, prior to getting into it, you should know that I failed at almost every type of writing that I tried to do. I tried to make it as a journalist. When I was 13, I realized I wasn't going to be a Major League Baseball player or a rock star, so I thought I would be a journalist so I could write about those two things. And I worked really hard through high school and university, and I worked so hard to make it in journalism, and I didn't have the passion for it. I couldn't do it. I went to school in Montreal. I spent a year in Montreal as a freelance writer, which is code for just dicking around Montreal for a year, not earning any money whatsoever. And so I knew it wasn't going to happen. I was like, I don't have what it takes to become a journalist. So I failed at journalism, and I decided to go back to school, back into academia, and see if I could make a go of that. And so I ended up going to the University of Arizona for a master's degree in drinking. Also film, but more so drinking. And I really enjoyed it again. It was writing, it was the culture of the mind. I couldn't have been happier to be at the U of A and just, study. And I ended up going to Indiana University for a PhD. And I got further into it, and I hit the wall. I stopped caring. I couldn't do the type of writing that was needed. I didn't have the passion for it. So I met my wife. We dropped out of our PhD program in 2006. We were in the middle of the country with her Volkswagen Jetta, no debt, and we could go wherever we wanted. So it was either New York or Los Angeles. And as a kid who grew up in Toronto, New York didn't scare me at all. I was like, New York's really easy. I'll fit in right away. Everything's fine. LA scared the shit out of me. There's no other way to put it. It scared the hell out of me because, one, I would have to learn to drive, and I'll get to that later. And two, it would forever answer the question of whether or not I could actually make it as a comedy writer. And I thought that was a scary enough prospect on its own, but I was like, we're going to go out here, we'll take the shot, and if it doesn't work, if it totally fails, totally blows up in our face, at least I know that I tried. And so I could go back to Canada or go to New York or go wherever we were going to go and just say, I tried, I didn't make it, the question has been answered. So moved to Los Angeles, got a job as a copywriter in advertising, yet another form of writing that I failed at. And, well, not really failed, just didn't do all that well in. And I started doing copywriting. And then one day in January of 2008, January 18th, 2008, I was having an instant messenger conversation with my friend Miles. Now at this point you should know Miles is Filipino. Miles is also racist. Against white people and Asians, so he's very universal racist. And we were having an instant messenger conversation about the TV show The Wire. And we're both enormous fans of The Wire. We love it. And Miles says, he goes, I don't trust any white person who doesn't watch The Wire. And I go, you know what, Miles, you're right. They don't understand what's happening in the streets. They don't get it. And then we started saying, well, what are white people doing instead of watching The Wire? And we said, oh, well, I know what they're doing. They're going to therapy, they're doing yoga, they're getting divorced, and it was that last one, the idea that there was a guy who was too busy getting divorced to watch a box set of The Wire, and I was like, I literally said in the instant messenger window, that's it, it's blog time. Those are the exact words, it's blog time. So I went to WordPress.com, which like literally millions of people go to WordPress.com every single day and start blogs. And I just started writing. And when I started writing, the intention was always just to make Miles laugh, just to make my friend Sean laugh, my friend Ron, my friend Mike. That was it. Those were the only people I thought were ever going to read it. Because prior to this, I'd done a really weird blog about a college football video game. It's a long story. Nobody read it, except for them, but it entertained them. And I thought that was going to be the process of this blog. So started writing, and this was, again, January 18th, 2008. And so I thought, you know, I'm starting to write, and I don't know if it was a lot of pent-up outward dislike of white people or self-loathing, but I wrote a lot really, really quickly. Like, a lot of stuff just went up on the site. And within 2 weeks, I got up to about 25, 26 entries, and it was really going well. And I thought to myself, you know, I think I've got something here. I think I got something that's actually interesting to people who aren't Mike, Miles, and Sean. So I composed an email to all of my friends, 25 people specifically, and literally planted the seed of stuff white people like. Now, you should know that these 25 people are not powerful people by any means. They're graduate students and Canadians, you know what I mean? Like, really not powerful people in the grand scheme of things at all. So, you know, it's not like I had a friend at the New York Times. And so I sent it to them saying, hey, check out this blog I've been working on. And they read it and they're like, oh, that's pretty funny. Then they sent it to their friends. And this was the most unbelievable thing to me. They sent it to their friends, who then sent it to their friends. So people who had no stake whatsoever in who I was or what I was doing started sending it out. And so the site went from 100 hits a day, and in the early days of the blog, most of those hits were actually misguided searches for organic fair trade coffee. But you know, like traffic's traffic, right? Like I'm not going to complain. And so, you know, we're getting about 150 hits a day, and it was funny. We actually had a guy. He was looking, so one of the things I put in the first site is white people like kitchen gadgets, you know what I mean, like KitchenAid stand mixers specifically. And some guy was looking for a green KitchenAid stand mixer, and he found my site by mistake, and he was furious. He just wrote in, he was like, I was looking for a green KitchenAid stand mixer to match my new kitchen. I found your horribly awful offensive website. You are a terrible man. Also, where can I get a green KitchenAid stand mixer? Send him to Williams-Sonoma. We're best friends to this day. But anyway, so it was like these misguided hits mostly. But then after I sent that initial email out to 25 people, all of a sudden the site went from 100 hits a day to 1,000 hits a day, like intentional hits of people looking for it. So 1,000 hits a day, I couldn't believe it. So I was working, and I was a copywriter, and the guy next to me was an account executive, and I told him, like, yeah, I got this website. I'm making 1,000 hits a day. He's like, 1,000 hits a day? Man, you need to run some ads on that site. You can make like $60 a month. Those were the magic words. Because as a good white person, I was like, $60, that is a sushi dinner. Let's do this. And so I took his advice, and I signed up for hosting. Like, I hosted it myself, the cheapest I could find. And I registered stuffwhitepeoplelike.com and stuffwhitepeoplelike.org. Because I was under the impression that you had to have a .org address if you were a nonprofit organization, because like MoveOn.org and things like that. So I wanted to spread the rumor that we were a nonprofit organization for the study of white people. When in reality, we were a for-profit organization for the study of white people. And so I registered stuffwhitepeoplelike.com, stuffwhitepeoplelike.org, and this was in sort of mid-February 2008. And I was like, there it is, stuffwhitepeoplelike.com. I can't believe it. I own a domain name. This is great. Gonna get that $60. Yeah, here comes some tekamaki. And on that day, the day that it went from stuffwhitepeoplelike.wordpress.com to stuffwhitepeoplelike.com, the site was linked to from Good Magazine's website, which is Al Gore's son's magazine, and Comedy Central, their insider blog, said, check out this site, it's really funny. So all of a sudden, that traffic went from 1,000 hits a day to 30,000 hits in a single day. Oh, it gets better, don't worry. And, of course, 30,000 hits in a day, that's awesome, crashes my site. So people are trying to get to it, it's all black, and I am freaking out. I'm like, oh my god, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened to me. I have to call the provider, and I am furious. I'm like the angriest I've ever been in my life. I'm on the phone, just yelling like, listen, no, you listen. I'm not paying you people $4.99 a month for this site not to work. Fix this. And, so the guy at the other end of the line's like, all right, calm down, Mr. Lander, relax. Let's just see what's going on here. Types it in, and he's like, oh yeah, you completely violated your terms of service. What are you running here, like an e-commerce site or something? I'm like, no, I'm just running a blog. There's a pause the other end of the line. He's like, is it an adult blog, sir? And I'm like, no, it's just words and stock photos of white people. And he's like, yeah, sure. Listen, your white porno site or whatever it is that you're running is going to cost you about $300 a month at this rate. And I'm like, I never even got the $60 I was promised. I can't afford this. So the site goes from stuffwhitepeoplelike.com back to WordPress, which has no ads, no money coming in. The sushi dinner is gone at this point, never to return. And I think to myself, well, that was awesome. 30,000 hits in a day. I made a blip on web culture. Amazing. Like, couldn't be happier. I was like, this is amazing. It'll never get bigger than that. Like, the Comedy Central and the Good Magazine link, this is the highest it was ever going to get. Next morning, I get up, I check, 30,000 hits is now 60,000 hits. Next day, 60 is now 120,000. Next day, it's 200,000. then 300,000 in a single day, then 400,000 in a single day. And I start to notice that on the WordPress rankings of the blogs they have, we start to beat CNN, which was amazing. I was like, this is interesting. And so, you know, I'm still working my job, doing a terrible job at this point, because I start getting interview requests from newspapers and radio stations, and they're all like, we want you to come on the show, we want to interview you. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I'm doing all these interviews, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I need to call some ex-girlfriends. And then around the end of February, this is when it got really interesting. I start getting emails from literary agents in New York City saying, Christian, we want to represent you. Christian, we want to represent you. And I just like, I can't believe this. It's been my, you know, this dream to actually write a book, like a real book. I can't believe it. And so I'm like, that's amazing. So I just keep getting these emails coming in, and then I start getting emails and calls from the talent agencies in Los Angeles, all the ones in Beverly Hills. And so, you know, moved out there with the dream of being a comedy writer, and you literally will spend your entire life in LA trying to get these people to notice you, take you on, represent you. And so by the end of February, at the time there were 5 major talent agencies in Los Angeles that represent pretty much all the talent, you know, all the acting, directing, and everything. William Morris, Endeavor, CAA, UTA, and ICM. By the end of February 2008, like a month and a week after I started the site, 4 of the 5 wanted to represent me, and the 5th one called 2 weeks too late. So this was blowing my mind. I was like, oh my God, I started this as a joke, and I'm going to get an agent out of this. This is incredible. I don't know how to choose an agent. This is going to be crazy. And so I call them all, and they're like, yeah, look, why don't you just come up to Beverly Hills, meet with us, and everything will be cool. And I'm like, okay. So March 1st, I'm scheduled to go to Beverly Hills to meet with the most powerful talent agencies in the world. I can't believe this. One problem. I don't drive a car. I did it. I own a car now, Prius, of course, don't worry. But at the time, I was trying my best to make a go of life in Los Angeles without a car, so I rode a bike everywhere I went, specifically a fixed-gear bike. If anyone knows what that is, it shouldn't surprise you. Basically, it's a bicycle that you make harder on yourself to look cool. That's what it is, and that's what I ride. And I also took public transit a lot. And in Los Angeles, taking public transit's interesting. Mainly because there's only 2 types of white men that ride the bus in Los Angeles. One are European men, and confused European men. And so when they see me, you know, all the other passengers on the bus, they can already tell I'm not European because my shoes aren't stylish enough and I'm not thin enough. Then there's the other kind of white man that rides the bus in Los Angeles, and that is a man with a DUI. So every time I get on the bus, I would just get these horrible daggers stared at me being like, what did you do to end up in this horrible, horrible place? And white women in Los Angeles don't ride the bus, ever, because they will always get a ride from someone. Doesn't matter how far away it is, like, we can't have you do that. So I'm not going to ride the bus up there, but I am going to bike to my meetings. So when I'm setting the meetings, I'm on the phone with them, and they're like, all right, Christian, when you get here, you valet your car. And I'm like, no, that's not going to be a problem. I'm taking my bike. They're like, okay, when you get here, you'll valet your motorcycle. And I go, no, I'm going to bicycle from Culver City up to the meetings. They're like, yeah, very funny. White people like bicycles. All right, bye-bye now. Don't forget to valet. And they hang up. They refuse to believe it's even possible that I would bike up there. So, you know, I get on my bike, and I'm chugging up there, The first place I go is CAA, nicknamed the Death Star, the most intimidating agency in the world. And their building is actually located in a place called Avenue of the Stars. That's the name of the street it's on. And they have this big circular driveway, and so I bike up on my fixie, and I'm going around Bentleys and Hummers and Lamborghinis. I'm like, man, I better not scratch one of these. I never got that $60. And so I get to the top of the ramp, and I'm looking around, no bike parking, obviously. And I look over, and I see the valet. And I think to myself, can I do this? Can I take the key to my kryptonite lock, toss it to the valet, and say, don't scratch it, asshole, I'll be back in 20 minutes. And I thought, like, you're not going to get another chance to do this. You really should do this. And I looked at him, and I'm like, man, his life doesn't look that great already, and it's a fixie, he's not going to know how to ride it, so I'm going to take the bike inside. So I bring my bike inside CAA, and I don't know if you've ever brought rubber tires onto a marble floor before, but the first words I ever heard in my Hollywood career in person were, hey asshole, tires off the floor. Bike now goes up over the shoulder, and I'm walking up to my first ever Hollywood meeting with a bike helmet, a backpack, sweat everywhere, and a bike on my shoulder, and the woman at the front desk just looks at me like this with the phone and goes, "Oh my God, you weren't kidding." And she just can't believe it. She's totally floored. She's like, "Bring your bike back here. I can't believe you really, yeah, this is amazing. You actually rode here." Like, they treat you like Jesus in LA if you ride a bike, you know what I mean? They're like, "You will die for our car sins. Literally, you'll probably be hit by a car, but thank you so much for biking here." So just could not believe that I biked there. So I biked up there, I had the meeting, like I'm just like this the whole time. I'm sorry I biked here. And they're like, "Wow, you're dedicated to this white thing." And then, I go have my other meetings and things are going great and they're awesome. And then I go have a meeting at William Morris. William Morris, not nearly as intimidating as CAA. And I get in and I walk in. I was able to lock my bike up out front, but I still have my helmet, my backpack, and my sweat and BO. And I walk in and I look over to the right and there's 4 chairs where you can sit, you wait for your meeting. And in 3 of the chairs are basically my mortal enemies. On the first stage, they're tall. And this is a long-standing gripe I have against all tall men. I consider them to be an enemy of mine because I think their life has been easier than mine in every single capacity. Women, sports, school, jobs, everything. It's so much easier. For every inch taller I would have been, my life would have been 30% better. And I firmly believe this. Like, things have worked out very well at driver's license 5'9", but if I was 6'1", I would have taken over for Conan. So I get in there and I already see from their legs that they have the height, and I'm like, oh, damn it. And then I look and they have like pointy shoes. The shoe, I just could never pull these off, and I'm like, God damn it. And I look up and their jeans are like pre-faded. And I'm like, oh man. And I get further up, and it was 2008, so they all had like Ed Hardy, like Dragon t-shirts on, and I was like, oh, that one's shiny. And then they all had sport coats on, and the sport coats like fit them perfectly. Like, I don't know where they bought them, because I don't know they make sport coats that small, but they fit them perfectly because these guys were in amazing shape, and I'm like, oh, this is getting worse. Then I look up further and I see their faces, and I'm like, oh no, this is terrible, because they had beards. They had stubble. And this is a problem for me because I consider my beard the source of all my literary powers. And the first thing I do when I meet another man with a beard is judge his beard against my beard in sort of like a battering ram confrontation to find out who has the superior beard. And I'm aware of my beard weaknesses, right? Like, it doesn't grow here. I know this. And it doesn't grow in the middle. I'm like a matador. Like, it doesn't connect. But not these dudes. It was like a putting green. Everything's filled in, cut perfectly. I'm like, great, I've lost height, I've lost weight, I've lost beard, and then their hair is just like wet and messy and perfect at the same time. And I'm like, oh my God, there's 3 of them. And so I get to the front desk and I'm like, hi, I'm Christian, I'm here to see Dan and Blake. Like, oh yeah, Christian, take a seat. I'm like, with those guys? And she's like, yes, everything's gonna be fine. So I sit down, I take my helmet off, and I put it in my backpack, and I just sit down next to him. And I'm nervous, right? It's literally my first day ever going to an agency. And I don't know what to do, and I'm starting to sweat even more than I already am. And I just look at the guys, and I'm like, what's up? Right? Like, super nervous, like, what's up? And they literally give me one of these. Nothing. And I'm like, yeah, I saw that coming. And so I'm just like, I'm like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. Like, I'm not tall enough to do this. And like, and I'm just so sad. I'm just like, I feel so out of place and so awkward. And then an assistant comes down and says, yeah, hi, Christian, Dan and Blake are ready to see you now. Come on up. And now, I don't know if you remember, I told you at the beginning of the story that when I got in, they were already waiting. And now, in Los Angeles, the amount of time you wait to see an agent is directly proportional to how important you are. At least on this one day. And so when I stood up and they noticed that I was sort of taken rather quickly to go meet with agents, the look on their face changed from disgust to horror. They were like, oh crap, who is this weird little man and what have we done to offend him? And I stood up so proud, and it was the greatest victory to date, the only victory I've ever had over taller men than me. And it was like I had dunked on all 3 of them at the same time and broke the backboard like when Vince Carter jumped over that French guy at the Olympics. It was the greatest day of my life. It was incredible. So I've defeated 3 tall men on March 1st. This is a good day. So March 1st, 2008, I have an agent. And my agent decides to go take out the blog to see if there's any interest in turning it into a book. And there is interest in turning it into a book. So by March 31st, I have a book deal in place. uncoincidentally, that was the day I quit my job. That was a good day. And Random House said to me, they're like, well, the blog's great. This is awesome. So it would be great if you could finish the book in 30 days. And being a former graduate student, I was like, oh, no footnotes? Yeah, no problem. Done. So went home for, pretty much for the month of April. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote and got it all finished, got it all done, got it submitted to Random House. They loved it. They were happy with it. We spent the next month adding things to the book, like how to name a white child and what's in that canvas grocery bag and all these little extra fun charts. And then submitted the absolute final manuscript on June 1st, 2008, just to give you an idea of the timeline. July 1st, 2008, the book is released. July 14th, 2008, the book is a New York Times bestseller.
Oh, wow.
And there it was.
Wow.
January 18th, 2008, literally dicking around on the internet with my friend Miles. July 18th, 2008, New York Times bestselling author.
Yeah.
That's how fast this is. And at no stage was there a special connection. No stage was there a favor or any sort of weird impropriety. Everything was just luck, timing, and just the power of the words of what I wrote. So literally it can happen to anyone, and it did happen to anyone. So every day in this process, I kept telling myself, Christian, this cannot get any bigger. This cannot get any bigger. Every day can't get any bigger. And every day just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So July was amazing, and then August was amazing. We went on book tour. This is incredible. Then I get a call at the end of August, 2008, from my publicist, Random House. Says, Christian, Conan O'Brien would like to have you on the show. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm freaking out. I know Conan's taller than me, but he gets a pass because of the red hair. So he knows the pain that we both went through as children. The nursery rhymes about the color of our pubic hair and so forth. And so I was so thrilled. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be on freaking Conan O'Brien. This is incredible. They're like, yep, September 6th, 2008. We're not going to take this away from you, so stop asking. Like, you're officially booked. And so I can't believe it. So every day I go to NBC.com and I just hit refresh. Because I want to know who the real guests are going to be, right? Like the real celebrities who are coming. And I'm like, could be anybody, right? Refresh. Finally comes back. The celebrity who's going to be on the show is Jerry O'Connell. Now, this is a huge deal for me. It may not be for everyone else for two reasons. One, Jerry O'Connell was on a Canadian TV show when I was growing up called My Secret Identity. It was a terrible television show, but I loved it. He played a teenager with superpowers. He could run very quickly, and he could fly if he sprayed 2 aerosol cans down towards the ground. This was the entire premise of the show. Ran for 4 seasons, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I should also point out that the Canadian government subsidizes the majority of our television production. But more importantly, Jerry O'Connell was in a movie called Stand By Me, which I hope all of you have seen. And in that movie, Jerry O'Connell was a fat kid. This is especially important because I was a fat kid. Jerry O'Connell grew up to marry a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. He is literally a hero to fat kids everywhere. And so I am just thrilled. I'm like, not only is he a Canadian TV icon, but he is also my fat kid hero. This is incredible. I cannot believe I'm going to go on a show with him. I am so excited. And the other guest was Tim Gunn from Project Runway. So, no. Jerry O'Connell, much more impressive. So I get to New York, and I'm going to be on Conan O'Brien, September 6th. I can't believe it. Conan O'Brien. And I'm in my dressing room, and when you're the internet famous guest on Conan O'Brien, it is literally a closet that they put you in. And I'm totally fine, couldn't be happier. So I'm just sitting in there, and there's this big plate of cookies in front of me. And I remember looking at the plate of cookies being like, don't eat them, you're going to throw up. Don't eat them, you're going to throw up. Don't eat them, you're going to throw up. And I'm like, okay, staying calm, everything's cool. And I'm in there, and I'm there with my agent. And my agent kind of looks like me, except he's this tall. So I know I could trust him. And potentially dominate him in a game of basketball. And he's like, he's there, and he's looking at me, he's like, dude, you're going to be fine. You're going to be just fine. Don't worry, you got this. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I'm backstage. There's Jerry's dressing room. There's Tim Gunn's dressing room. Like, what do you do? Like, I've never been here before. I've never been backstage at a late night talk show before. Like, can you just go up to the dressing rooms and be like, hey, how's it going? Or whatever. And I'm like, oh, do I do it? But I know I'm going to be super awkward if I do it. I know I'm going to go up to Jerry's dressing room and be like, hey, Jerry. Yeah, hey, Jerry. Do you, remember when you were fat? Right? And it's like, and then I have all these scenarios running through my head of how that's going to go wrong. Like, he's like, I got to go now. And then he's going to go on the show and be like, Conan, you got some weird dude backstage who's obsessed with fat kids. Like, it's going to be very, very weird. So I'm like, no, I'm just going to stay in this dressing room. I'll meet him out there. I'm just going to let it go. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to look like a professional who knows what he's doing. So I'm waiting in my dressing room. And there's a knock at my door. And I look over, and It's freaking Jerry O'Connell. And he points at my agent, goes, "Are you the guy? You start white people like guy? You start white people like guy?" My agent just slowly goes, he points at me and he goes, "Oh my God, I read that site all the time, it's so funny." I'm trying to get one word in, I'm like, "Sliders, you get," yeah, nothing, he just can't stop talking about it. He's like, "Oh, that's just so funny. Hi, site's hilarious, I got the book when it came out, oh my God, everything's great." I'm trying to get one word, like, "Can't hardly wait, you," nothing, he's like, "Oh my God, it's hilarious, listen man, after the show I got a couple people I want you to meet, but I'm gonna go out there right now, stick around, seriously, a couple people I want you to meet, alright, I'm gone, bye, nice to meet you, gone." And I just look at my agent, I'm like, "Man, I think I just met Jerry O'Connell." And I couldn't believe it, so I'm on cloud 9. I'm like, I freaking sort of met Jerry O'Connell. He yelled at me, this is amazing. So then he goes on, and he's absolutely hilarious. He's amazing. He's Jerry O'Connell. He's incredible. And Tim Gunn goes on. He's also amazing. He's incredible. And now it's my turn. So I'm backstage, ready to take me on. And now everything I tell you from this point on is actually from the TiVoed episode of the show because I blacked out. I don't remember any of this actually happening. So I get out to Conan O'Brien and I'm on the stage, and you should know the layout. So the layout is like Jerry's over here, Tim Gunn's here, I'm here, and then Conan's right here. Okay, so having the interview, and I'm like, don't fuck this up, Christian. And I look over, and Conan's talking to me. I'm like, "Oh my God, it's Conan." And Conan's like, "Oh, Christian, so what are some things white people like?" And I'm like, "Oh, Conan, they farmers markets." And Conan's like, "Yeah, we do like farmers markets." And I look over at Tim Gunn. He's like, and then Jerry's like this. "Oh my God! Oh, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard." I'm just looking over like, "Man, this is going great." I go back to Conan O'Brien, and he's like, "Hey, Christian, we got Tim Gunn on the show. He knows a lot about fashion, so maybe what are some clothes that white people like?" And I'm about to answer him, like, I think I got something really sharp, really smart. I'm about to answer him when I feel a hand pinching my cardigan sweater. And I look over. Jerry O'Connell has reached over Tim Gunn and is pinching my cardigan sweater, looking at me going, "Sweaters! White people like sweaters! They love sweaters!" Now, all of this really happened, and you want to believe, right? Like, you want to believe that I'm the guy who's just cool enough to be like, yeah, Conan, Jerry's right. They like sweaters. No. I'm looking at my fat kid hero pinching me on Conan O'Brien, and I'm not waking up, and I'm like, "Oh shit, this is happening." And I look at Conan, and before the awkward silence could come in, I go, "Shorts?" And Conan's like, "Oh yeah, we do." And Tim Gunn's like, "Mm-hmm." And Jerry's like, "Ah!" Literally falls out of his chair laughing. And I'm like, "Man, this is the greatest interview ever." And I look at Tim Gunn, and I'm like, "Maybe not." And I go right back to Conan, and the interview's over, and I'm backstage, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I did it. I was on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. This is incredible. I really need to call some ex-girlfriends." And I'm backstage, and I was like, "I did it. I can't believe I did it." I just hear, "Christian! Christian!" I turn around. It's freaking Jerry O'Connell. And he's like, "Yeah, man, here's those people I want you to meet." And I'm like, oh, awesome. And he gets out of the way, he's like, "It's my parents." Like, I don't know what stage of the relationship that we're at, but apparently it's the parent meeting stage. And so we're all sort of talking for a little bit, and then of course, he's like, "Oh, I gotta take this." And so now I'm alone with Jerry O'Connell's parents backstage, and thank God they filmed that show in Toronto, because we just talked about intersections for about 15 minutes, everything was fine, and I didn't freak out, and then he comes back and he's like, "Oh man, that was hilarious. Listen, when we get back to LA, I'm gonna give you my info. Your wife, we should all go out to dinner." And I get his info in my head, I'm like, "Yeah, Jerry, sure thing." Because I know in my head, this dinner is never, ever, ever, ever happening. And here's why. Not that Jerry wouldn't go, because I think it's been pretty clearly established. He definitely would go. But Jerry and Rebecca Romaine, O'Connell, whatever her name is, are legitimate celebrities. Like, really, like, she's Mystique in X-Men, like, real celebrities. And, Jerry's like, he has like a six-pack and great hair, and he's like tall, and Rebecca Romaine, seems like a swimsuit model, like, gorgeous. And then I'm me, and, my wife, she's very, very cute, but she's about this tall. Again, so I can trust her. She's kind of pale and has sort of similar colored hair, and I have this fear that we're going to go to a restaurant together, and there'll be a photographer afterwards. And that, a couple weeks later, I'll be in the supermarket, Us Weekly, and I'll be flipping through, there's a picture of all four of us, and the caption's going to read, "Jerry and Rebecca participate in the couples edition of the Make-A-Wish Foundation." And that would have been the most gentle headline to come out of that experience. So I'm like, "No, dinner, not happening," but got the email, this is awesome. So, I go back to LA, and all of a sudden they're like, "Yeah, Christian, Carson Daly we'd like you to have on the show." And I'm like, "Yeah, all right, here we go. The big time, 2 a.m. slot." And so I go to Carson Daly, where I'm the headliner. Give you an idea of how primo the 2 a.m. slot on NBC is. But everyone on the show was awesome. Really nice guy, I'm in the dressing room. Sorry. And I'm looking at the wall, and there's all these pictures on the wall. And one of the pictures is freaking Jerry O'Connell on the wall singing. And my wife's with me, and she's like, you have to email him. You are never going to get another non-weird opportunity to send him an email. Write him something. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So I take my phone out. I got his email address in there, and I just write him like, hey, Jerry, I don't know if you remember me. We were on Conan together last week. But Christian Lander, I'm going to be on Carson Daly tonight. Thought you might want to know. Shh, Christian, send. Awesome, I'm T-boing it right now. Jerry. I look at my phone, I'm like, what? Really? And this is like September 18th, 2008. So like, remember, January 18th, I start a blog as a joke. September 18th, I might have to get a restraining order against Jerry O'Connell to protect my safety. It's like, this is how fast it all happened. So it was like, all of this is going on in 2008, and I cannot believe it. So since then, things have just gone in all sorts of crazy directions. So the book moved on. The book was published in the UK. The book was published in Australia, where it was a bestseller, just did tremendously well in Australia. I was actually in Sydney a month ago, and I gave a talk at the Sydney Opera House. Like, they actually let me speak at the Opera House. I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. So really popular in Australia, really popular in the UK, and the book has been translated into some foreign editions. The book was translated into Dutch. And the Dutch are very clever people. They took back the land from the sea and all sorts of things. And their version of Stuff White People Like actually has a mirror on the front of the book. So when you hold up your copy of Stuffen White and People Looking, or I don't speak Dutch, right? You hold it up and you see your own face staring back at you. Very sharp people, the Dutch. So, it was translated in Dutch, which was great. And then this year, this is legitimately happening. This is not made up. This is for real, 100%. I'll show you the emails. The book is being translated into Japanese. Now, here's why it's important. Because every day, I dream. The book will be turned into a textbook. I have this fantasy of being at LAX, Tom Bradley Terminal, and just seeing Japanese businessmen getting off the plane wearing, like, Fleet Foxes t-shirts. You know what I mean? And then, like, coming and be like, what is organic coffee? You know? And then, like, at the meeting, they're flipping through, you know what I mean? Like, oh, yeah, alternative newspapers, oh. You play Frisbee sports, your son is gifted, right? And then using it for, like, better deals for the Japanese corporations that they work for. So hopefully I'll create a trade imbalance, which would be fantastic. So that's happened. It's been, that was amazing. And then the book, I've got to go through the interesting process of Hollywood. So the book was optioned to become a TV show, and they hired me on to write it. And I worked with a great director, and we wrote it together, and it was with Imagine, so the producers of Arrested Development were doing it. So you think you're like, Arrested Development, stuff white people like, this really hot director, it's like, this is going to be great. So we sold it to Fox, and the concept of the show was the wrong kind of white guy. And my joke about the wrong kind of white guy is anyone who disagrees with the right kind of white guy. So, Republicans, frat boys, etc. So it was the wrong kind of white guy moving to LA to work at like a Tom's of Maine type company. And the joke of the company was saving the world through vanity, right? And so he's trying to figure out what he's doing there. He doesn't know. And so he's the wrong kind of white guy being taught how to become the right kind of white guy by a black guy. And that was the concept of the show, is that he had like this moleskin notebook full of tips that he'd learned growing up middle class in the LA area. And so it was a really funny show, and it was really cool, and everything was great. And then it died. That was it. It's how TV works. I'm no bitterness. It's just how TV works. Like you try, and then just evaporates. So no problem there. It was it was an amazing run, and since then, so then in 2009. I got to go all over the U.S. doing college lectures and book tour and all sorts of events. I got to travel over the country, and that's where I started to get the idea for doing this book, which is the Regional Guide to White People. And I'd always thought it'd be really funny to do sort of these cities, and I picked out a bunch of cities to do it. People always ask me, like, well, Christian, how do you define a white city? And I'm like, anywhere where property values outstrip income is a white city. So Austin, Texas, Madison, Wisconsin, Boulder, Colorado, La Jolla, California, basically anywhere you're like, how do people afford houses like this and no one seems to have a job, right? That is a white city. So that's how I went through. So I was traveling and doing all the research. But the thing was, I didn't have a designer that I could work with. Like, I didn't just have someone I trusted who could do it. And something amazing happened in 2009. I went to Arkansas, the University of Arkansas, to give a lecture. And when I got there, these two students, two seniors, had done 100 unique Stuff White People Like posters for the event. like 100 different ones for the event. And they basically, their logic was, it's very good logic, was like, look, we need stuff for our portfolio when we get out of here, so let's just take on this chance, and let's maybe you'll like it, who knows. And they were gorgeous, and I was amazed at how great it was. And they put them up all over campus, and students were just stealing them everywhere. The event was jam-packed. It was awesome. And then so after, and then when I was doing my book signing, they just had stacks of the leftovers, and people were just like fighting each other, like clawing each other to get at them, and I was really impressed with these two students. And so I was like, look, do you guys want to sell these, on the site? And they're like, oh my God, that'd be amazing. So started selling the posters on the site. And then I asked them, like, do you guys think you could do line drawings of kind of like obnoxious white people? They're like, yeah, we can handle this. So I started going back and forth and sort of throwing out the ideas for the drawings that I wanted to do for the white people for the regional areas, and they just got it. They just started, the drawings they sent back were just amazing. So it was this awesome sort of coincidence that I met these two just college seniors in Arkansas who became the designers for the book, and it's been great, and the book turned out fantastic, and I think it's really, really hilarious, and I'll get into some of the readings in a second. And so all of this stuff has been going on. It's been incredible, and the book got published this year, obviously, and it's been amazing. And so all of this stuff has been positive. It's all been great, and it'd be great if you believed that taking this route to becoming a published author was all positive and there's no negative whatsoever. But I don't know if you guys have been on the internet recently, but it's not quite as positive as the picture that I paint. There's a lot of negativity out there, and so this site gets an outrageous amount of criticism sent in, only in the comments, but via email and in person. Just like people get very, very upset. And it's especially if you talk about race on the internet. Now, the amazing thing about race on the internet is you don't actually need to talk about race to set off a race war. You could literally put a video on YouTube of like a laughing, giggling baby. That's it. 30 seconds. Baby, giggling, in a crib. Awesome, right? Comment number 1. Aw, what a cute baby. Comment number 2. Fuck that white baby. Then you hit refresh, 8 million comments, and like every ethnic slur in the world thrown back and forth off of a giggling baby. So you can imagine what happens with my site. So just the emails that I get coming into this site are unbelievable. I actually had someone write in, and I'm not embellishing this at all. He goes, "You racist piece of shit. I hope that you go to jail and get raped and get AIDS and die. But don't die so quickly that you can't watch your entire family die of cancer." Wow. Signed, Anonymous. This was the email that I got because I had the audacity to say that white people like yoga. Right? So you can imagine what it's like out there. So yeah, it's an interesting world when you take away accountability and add anonymity. And so yeah, I get a lot of that criticism. But I get some people who actually do come at the site, the books, with fairly legitimate criticism. And some not. Legitimate criticisms, people are like, well, I'm not white, and I like a lot of stuff on this site. What does that say? I'm like, well, one, it says you are white, so don't even sweat it. But I explained to them, it's like the site is not called stuff only white people can like. All kinds of people can like it. But if you like it, people will call you white, and just preparing you for your future life. And people usually get it right away. And that's cool, and it's awesome. And some people say you're an elitist. I'm like, yes, I'm a white male in my 30s. Of course I'm an elitist asking about music. And then they get it right away, and everything's cool. And then I just get this amazing amount of just white rage from people who are furious about what they see as a double standard. They're just so angry. They're just like, you know what, man, your site is crap. It's unbelievable. It's so unfair. It's okay to make fun of white people. You know what, man, you just cycle stuff black people like, that'd be racist. And I'm like, yep. Right? Like, I check the website address. It's called Stuff White People Like. Look at me, dude. Like, I think it's racially acceptable for me to write this site. And he's just, they're so unbelievably angry at what they see as an unfair double standard. Just saying, why is it okay to make fun of white people, man? Why is it okay, but it's not okay to make fun of, black people or Latinos or whatever? And it's like, I respond to them in the early days and then I just stop because it's basically pointless trying to make this argument. But I always say that under any circumstance, no matter what, it is always okay to make fun of white people. There is never a scenario where it's not okay to make fun of white people. And someone's like, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe. And I'm like, okay, let me prove my point. There is no such thing as an ethnic slur that hurts a white person. Anyone who gets offended by honky or cracker are really just reaching. You know what I mean? You're really trying to be offended. And being offended is in the book, so don't worry. You're really trying to be offended. And I say that because, most ethnic slurs are rooted in history, like a very painful part of history, that still affects life today. And the amazing thing about white people is that history of white people is interesting in that any time it was bad and rough in the olden days, it all worked out great. You know, so like the potato famine in Ireland, oh man, that sucked, don't get me wrong, but it all worked out fantastic. Like, except for the people in Ireland. But the people who left, it's all great. So there's no slur there that hurts. And so this is why white people like to get history degrees, because it always has a happy ending for them. And so I say that, like, when you do, so they're like, all right, well, I guess that does make sense why we can't make fun of white people, but what do I do? Like, I'm going to get into a fight with a white person. I know this is going to happen. We're going to argue about something. Like, what can I do? What can I reach into my, reach back for the fastball? Like, what can I grab and just throw it at them, just hurt them, just really get them? And I'm like, all right, there is actually one slur you can call a white person that really, just gets them. Call them average. That is the closest thing we have to an ethnic slur. As something that would infuriate me and throw me over to the edge, so I start choking someone out, never call me that. That's our word. It would just be like, that's the word. And so that is my explanation about why it is always okay to make fun of white people. And so so for that reason alone, it's not to say that people have not taken this concept and spread it out to other sites. So there is a stuff black people like, stuff Latinos like, stuff Asians like, stuff gay people like, stuff Hill people like, stuff unemployed people like, stuff Hollywood assistants like, stuff Australian people like, stuff Dutch people like, stuff African people like, and stuff Jewish people like, stuff Jewish parents like, and so forth and so forth. Books have even been published, basically spun off the idea. Stuff Christians like was turned into a book. Stuff Midwesterners was turned into a book. Stuff hipsters hate was turned into a book. Like, all of this stuff, and they did a really good job of crediting me by not crediting me at all, which is fantastic. And so all of these spin-off sites have come out, and it's been incredible. And some of them are great, some of them are so-so, and some of them are just so clever, it just angers me that I didn't come up with this idea. So in Australia, someone created a website called Stuff Bogans Like. And Bogan is like an Australian frat boy. It's kind of hard to describe exactly what the translation is. It's sort of like a frat boy. And they created a site called Stuff Bogans Like, and it's really funny and it just talks about bogans. And then they also created a second site called Stuff Goths Hate, and it just redirects back to the Stuff Bogans Like website. And I'm like, 2 for 1, man. Way to go, Australia. And then there's a guy in New York who I actually met this year who made a site called White Stuff People Like. And its entries are like sugar and cocaine and flour. And I'm like, damn it, man, like a little word switch here, that would have been 2 for 2. That would have been incredible. So those are some of the spin-offs that have done really well, and that's pretty much the story. And so the other thing that's happened this year that's been incredible was I was able to, after selling the pilot, writing the pilot, going through that whole process, I ended up getting staffed on a TV show that's going to come out next year on MTV. It's an animated show, and it's been incredible. So, all of these dreams that I had when I moved to LA, I mean, being a New York Times bestseller was not something I actually thought could really happen. But ironically, it was easier than being a TV writer. And I couldn't believe it. So literally all of them have come true because I started this blog, and I just wrote. That was it. And so that has been the last 2 years of my life. And it's just been unbelievable. And every day, I can't believe it's happened. And there's regular guys who are going to meet who just got very, 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 very lucky. So that's the story of Stuff White People Like. I'm going to read you a couple of entries that I think are really funny from the new book, and then I will stop talking. And I will talk to you individually. All right, so number 75, The Big Lebowski. When it comes to the Coen brothers, white people can't get enough. Their films are intelligent, complex, brilliantly done, and funny, sort of. You see, these filmmaking brothers often tackle large issues with dense, layered scripts in movies that most white people think are funny, but they can't be sure until they see someone smarter than them laughing at the screen. Fortunately, the Coen brothers made a movie, The Big Lebowski, which is the most straightforwardly funny movie that they've ever made, and therefore is the absolute favorite of white people everywhere. The movie is a modern update on film noir, something that all white people profess to like but don't actually watch. In fact, white people generally consider The Big Sleep to be the best film they've never seen. Most white people say they love The Big Lebowski because it has good characters. It's quotable. It's just fantastic filmmaking. But as we've proven time and again, the film simply provides white people with another excuse for themed drinking. Specifically, white Russians. If you take nothing away from this film, just remember that it is impossible to order this drink without a white person immediately quoting something from the movie. This probably explains why every time you've had one of these drinks, a white person had started yelling at you about Donnie or telling you that the dude abides. If you happen to have any Spanish blood in you, then a quick quote from the Jesus character played by John Turturro will almost certainly net you a second free drink courtesy of a delighted white person. The film was also responsible for a significant spike in white people going bowling. The pastime has always been popular with retro white people, specifically women who wear pointy 50s glasses, and men who are into tiki bars and Hawaiian shirts. But the pastime has vaulted into the realm of the acceptable for millions of white people after the release of this film, suggesting a Lebowski night at a local bowling alley is a surefire hit at increasing your popularity with white people. When you go to the alley, you may notice groups of other white people who are dressed in slightly vintage clothes, look stronger than normal white people, and don't smile very often. They are known as working class white people, and will probably not be amused by your white friend's clever name for a bowling team. They will probably be even less amused by your white friend who will inevitably show up wearing a bathrobe, shorts, and sunglasses. On second thought, it's probably best to avoid this movie altogether. That I am guilty of almost all of those things. Number 79, and I know this is happening around here. Expensive versions of cheap food. If you're looking for a small business idea, or you just need to cook a meal that'll make a white person happy, you can never go wrong making a very expensive version of something that is normally cheap food. For example, many fancy restaurants have started offering gourmet hamburgers made with grass-fed organic prime beef, topped with expensive cheese, onions, and maybe truffles, served on brioche rolls. Additional examples include expensive hot dog carts, fancy cupcake shops, and restaurants offering $20 versions of macaroni and cheese. Well, the concept of taking a type of food that's normally enjoyed by poor people and then making it prohibitively expensive can be seen as an insult or giant middle finger to poverty. White people don't see it that way. Instead, white people view these foods as a clever take on an old classic. Or, in other words, it allows them to enjoy the food that would get them branded as the wrong kind of white person if they were to profess a love for it in a group setting. For example, I love Twinkies would be met with scorn and derision. But saying something like, oh my god, have you tried the new dessert at Delicieux? It's whipped heavy cream injected into this amazing masa cake. They call it an evil Twinkie. Get it? Would result in a mad dash for reservations. White people will often refer to these dishes as comfort food, because there are few things in the world more comforting to white people than paying $14.99 for a grilled cheese sandwich. We're such assholes. You know, because I would absolutely pay $14.99 for a grilled cheese sandwich right now. The last one I'm going to read, maybe I'm hungry, but it's all sort of foodie-based ones. Number 82, waiting in line. When you see a long line of non-white people waiting for food, it's often the sign of a tragic event. Communism, food shortages, or mismanagement by a dictator. When you see a long line of white people waiting for food, it is the sign of a good bakery or a concept restaurant. Though you view waiting in line for food to be emblematic of all that is wrong with the world, white people see it as a small price to pay for a top-notch cupcake. After years of waiting in lines for bakeries, concept restaurants, and ethnic restaurants with online buzz, white people have simply become accustomed to waiting in line. So much so that if they see a line near their intended destination, they'll simply move to the back and begin waiting. Additionally, white people will get in line without asking anyone if they're in the right line. To ask if they're in the correct line would possibly give them away as someone who doesn't know what they're doing, or much worse, a first-time customer. If you have a friend with a restaurant and you'd like to see his or her new business succeed, simply follow this plan. The first step is to get a few friends to wait in line in front of the restaurant. Ideally, these would be white friends, but Asian friends are also acceptable. For some reason, Asians are also willing to wait ungodly amounts of time for food. Also, white people find a line of Asian people to be comforting. Once you've assembled this line, simply wait for about 30 minutes. Any white person that walks by will be instinctively just fall in line and wait for their turn to eat. Of course, after they've waited in line for an hour, any food consumed will taste as though it's the finest meal they've ever eaten. So their reviews will be considerably higher than if they just walked in off the street. But before you start joining white people in line for just about anything, you should understand that there are a lot of rules. The first is that white people take extreme pleasure in watching someone attempt to cut to the front of the line, only to be rebuffed and sent to the back. This will make their entire day. On the flip side of that, watching someone successfully cut the line can lead to the closest approximation of a white person riot. This, of course, is defined as 15 people mumbling to each other and one particularly bold white person saying something sarcastic like, yeah, that's right, we're just waiting in line for fun. So, those are my three readings, and that's the story of stuff white people like. Do you guys have any questions for me about white people? Or about the process? Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a white person?
Yes. I have a few things that give me away. Red hair, beard, glasses, cardigan sweater, expensive jeans. I got 9 things going right now. I'm not even getting into my pointless degrees, but yeah, I definitely consider myself to be a white person. Did you have a question?
I did.
Yes. This one. The reason is, the first one's great. Don't get me wrong, the first one's great. But what was interesting was two things, and thank you because this is going to let me kiss my own ass for a second. So the first one was they didn't want to change the stuff from the site originally because people had loved the site so much. So some of the early entries, I was still finding the voice of the site. I was sort of finding the comedy of the site. So some of the early entries they're pretty funny, but they're not that funny. They're super short, and they're just not the same. So I kind of hit a stride towards the end that I think was really funny. So with this one, I started to hit the ground running. So all of it is funny all the way through. And if you don't believe me, 2 weeks ago the book was reviewed in the New York Times, and I was called preternaturally excellent. No big deal. I mean, you brought this up, not me, right? Like, take it easy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just that's what they said. You know, I don't know if you've heard of them. They're called the New York Times. And, no, but that literally did happen. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I'm thinking about getting the entire review tattooed on my back. Like, the whole thing. And then, like, preternaturally excellent over my stomach. Like, Tupac had Thug Life. Like, but that totally did happen. So, yeah, I'd say this. That would be my opinion, my personal opinion. Yeah.
Do you think that some white people who've been offended by your website are just mad that you called them out?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that definitely upsets people a lot. You know what I mean? They're like, this site's not me, man. This site's not me. I don't like shit. I don't like frisbee sports. You know what I mean? I like everything else, but I don't like frisbee sports. This guy's a dick. So yeah, that definitely upsets people. But it's funny when people ask me to explain why the site got popular. Like, what are some reasons you think? I'm like, half of it are definitely people clicking through, being like, okay, yeah, he got me. All right, he got me. All right, he got me. Yeah. But the other half were people clicking through going, yep, I know this asshole. Forward, right? You know what I mean? With the subject line, think you're unique, right? So yeah, and then of course there's like the scores of white people who are just like, and actually the scores of black people who are like, we've been saying this for years, why didn't one of us write it down? You know, and I'm like, yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I think there's a number of reasons for white people to dislike me, and that is just one of them. Yeah.
I don't know how much you know for sure about the demographics of your blog audience versus your book audience, but do you think, giving your fans, that if you took the exact same words, the exact same content of your books, but made you not white, like Latino or black,
how can we do? Can I do that?
That'd
be awesome.
Think it was like not as funny.
Yeah. Yes. Well, no, not necessarily not as funny. So I've actually thought about this a lot as well. So in the early days of the site, I put my own picture up on the site just because I was letting my friends know, I'm like, yeah, I'm making fun of you, but I'm also making fun of me. Like, I'm just making that clear. But I wasn't. And I've never really been on the site trying to be like, look at me, look at me, look at me, this is all about me, you know. So in the beginning, people didn't know what race I was. They had no idea. So people were just posting all of these like long essays like, he's clearly an Asian American man. There's no question he's an Asian American man. And then all these other people were like, no, trust me, man, he's a black guy who went to Harvard. And I'm just like, and then when they found out I was a white Canadian, they were really disappointed. And I was like, yeah, you know, me too, right? Like, I wish I was a black guy who went to Harvard. That'd be awesome. But it would have definitely been so. In terms of this blog and this book being a dangerous idea, you know, in terms of the idea of sort of calling up the upper middle class, liberal, white, just calling them white outright, saying, and the things that they like will become white. It would have been way more dangerous if it was written by someone who wasn't white and grew up in an upper middle class level background, for sure. It would have been way more dangerous, way more, they would have got way more hate mail, way more anger. I think because of who I am, because I'm a white Canadian, I mean, you can write off most of the stuff, because there's some fairly biting satire about racism and white people in here that you can just write off as goofy humor because of, you know, the way I look, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. If I was a different ethnicity, it would have been a completely different story. Like, it would have been much more rage, much more anger. Like, death threats, literal death threats would have come in, for sure. I don't doubt that for a second. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what race you were. I assumed you were white. Black. I saw the blog, yes. I don't know, a couple of years ago or something, whenever. And then I heard you today, and I still couldn't tell. Like, well, he could maybe be black.
Really?
I don't know. Yeah. A little bit, but I just heard it for a second on the radio.
That's awesome. And so, anyway, if I can just trick one person to hearing my voice and thinking I'm black, then I made a difference.
Yeah, I assume that I think because I've never really white people are so unable to joke about ourselves, you know,
yeah.
And so I think I made that assumption. But I'm wondering if you, like, are you now kind of an authority, considered an authority on race. You know what I'm saying? And do people ask you for like authoritative ideas about like what dynamics of racism and things like that?
Yeah. I wrote 2 books on it. You know what I mean? Like I mean, look,
on like the whole like history of racism.
Sure. I mean, look, I don't profess to be anything that I'm not, and I'm a comedy writer first of all. So much of the stuff coming out of this was just experiences of my life growing up in Toronto, and Toronto is, according to the UN, the most diverse city in the world. Just people from all over the world live in Toronto. The white people haven't been the majority in Toronto since like the late '80s, right? So it's a very, very diverse city, and so we got all this very interesting stuff about race and about what counts as white stuff. You know what I mean? Like why is this list white? You know what I mean? And why are people who like this considered white within their own communities? And this is just sort of basic stuff in Toronto. And so that was going through it, but I'm definitely considered somewhat of an expert, at least on white people. And so what I've had from actual academics, like real people who are answering the hard questions, not the easy questions, like, what do white people, you know what I mean, like, do white people like this kind of bike or this kind of bike? You know what I mean? Like, they're answering the real questions. They've actually said that they appreciate the blog and the books because one of the hardest concepts to teach freshman white kids is the idea of white privilege. Because most of the textbooks that they'll read, most of the things they view as being attacked. And the second that you start, especially as an 18-year-old, I mean, I was a douchebag when I was 18. Like, I know this for a fact. I mean, I would have just accepted it and just been, like, apologizing over and over again, but not every student's like that. So it's really hard to get that concept in there. And doing it with academic texts is really hard. So what they do is they just say, here, go look at the website. And they'd read it, and it's really funny and light and really easy to read. And they're like, that was hilarious. And they're like, okay, so why is that stuff white people like? You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, a light bulb goes off. And then they can have a more serious conversation guided by someone a lot smarter than me. But they're saying as like an opening salvo to an actual discussion about race, they say this has been a life changer for them in terms of in the classroom. Just because students are willing to be like, oh yeah, white is wealth and exponential amounts of free time and self-centered and all sorts of like, and that comes from generations of wealth. And so they start to get it a little more once they're guided by someone a lot smarter. And I don't have the ability to do that in the books for sure, but the more intelligent people definitely do. But they say it's a good start. Yeah.
I really enjoyed your descriptions of the advanced white people.
Yes.
Any plans to further explore that
the subculture of advanced white people? This one is definitely more advanced on the white people scale. Like we're getting deep into stuff here. You know what I mean? Like we're getting Anthony Bourdain deep. Like this is going like under. It's getting. I think. I don't know. Like when I wrote the first book, I thought it, just because I'm sort of a natural born pessimist, I thought it was going to completely fail in every way, just total disaster, and didn't. And then I was like, oh crap, how am I ever going to write a second one? You know what I mean? Like because I never thought I'd have enough material. I never thought it'd be funny. I just you have these fears like I don't know how I did that. Like I'm going to lose it all. It's all going to be terrible. And so it actually I had the material. But when I try and think about a third book, which I mean, this one just came out, so like, I need a break. But I feel like the third book would have to be, like, I don't have any kids yet, and I feel like I'm going to be the most obnoxious person in the world if I have a kid. You know what I mean? Like, look how creative he is. Look how he stacked his Legos. He's a genius. So I think it would be on that side. But, like, advanced white people, you got to be careful because it's like, it's like Inception level white people. You know what I mean? It's like the white person within the white person within the white person. You know what I mean? Or Portland, Oregon. You know what I mean? Whatever. You know what I mean? Like one of the two. But yeah, it's when they come along, I'll keep updating the site when I find the ones that are just what I mean, just hit it just right. Yeah.
Are most of your fans white, mixed?
Well, the government doesn't track race and book sales just yet. I got a number of theories about this. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it's something I can only base on personal appearances, right? And so,
I can answer it.
Yeah. Yes, please. You can if you want to answer it. I would appreciate it.
The answer obviously would be no. I actually have a bunch of friends, and I bought the book, and first you see the title, and it's pretty funny. I saw a blog, and then we started going through, and we're going, shit, I think we're half white.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, it is definitely a broader mix than you'd think. It's been really funny. I've actually had a lot of people who are first-generation college students, or were first-generation college students, come to me and be like, why couldn't you have published this before I went to college? You would have saved me like 3 years of trying to figure out these insane white people. Like, I had to learn all this on my own, and I should have written it down, you bastard! And so I've had that, and then just people, I mean, the other thing is people just get it. And the other thing about the race aspect, too, is people who aren't white, but grew up relatively affluent in an upper liberal middle class society get the joke right away. They understand that, again, they get called an Oreo, a coconut, a banana, etc. because they have the taste. And, you know what I mean? So people are always like, if I like all these things, and I'm not white, I like everything on the list, does that make me white? I'm like, no. It just makes you rich. And yeah, so I would say that is some of the diversity that comes with the book for sure. Yeah.
That's actually something I wanted to ask you about, like what you just said, because when I first looked at the site and I saw that it was called Stuff White People Like, the first thing I did after reading it, and I have to confess I'm a sociology professor.
Okay.
The first thing I thought was, this is about class, and it's named Stuff White People Like, but it's really about class. And I'm wondering if you think that is what led to some of the popularity, or that's what led to maybe some of the controversy.
Yeah, it definitely led to a lot of the rage and a lot of the controversy, for sure. But I think people always come up to me and they're like, you know what, man, site's pretty cool. Don't get me wrong, pretty cool site. But you should totally call it Stuff upper middle class white people like. You know what I mean? Like very specific. And I'm like, yeah, you got any other tips to make it less funny? Because I think for me, it was like when we were starting it, it was just, it'd been 8 years of Bush, and the white people that I'm writing about are people who are just like, did not want to be called white. You know what I mean? They were like, no, we're upper middle class progressives. Like, we're not really, we're everybody, man. Like, look at me, I have a black friend. Like, we're totally cool. You know what I mean? Like, didn't want to be called white. And it was like, it was fun, as it went on. This wasn't the intention, but just cram it back down their throat. Like, yep, you are white. Look at it. You know what I mean? Like, you have an English degree. But the thing for me was where it came from, and this was sort of an unintended consequence, was, so I grew up in Toronto, Canada, middle of the city, and Toronto, like a lot of cities like Portland and San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York, ultimately the concept of a working class white person ended in my lifetime. Like my neighborhood, when my dad bought in, gentrification, I know, was still a working class neighborhood, and literally through the 80s I watched those families, out they went. So by the time I got to high school, the only white people I knew in Toronto were these kind of white people. That was it. I did not meet this is not being made up, I didn't meet my first conservative until I moved to Arizona when I was 22 years old. Wow. Dead serious. It was that long. And I couldn't believe it when I met him, because he was like 22 as well. And I was like, dude, how are you this bitter? You should want to save the world at 22, right? Like, what are you going to be like at 40? Like, it just, as a Canadian, it blew my mind. But that was the bubble that I was in. So it was like, these were the only so the joke from Miles and I was always like, these are the only kind of white people we know. We don't really deal with the other kind. So that was the humor. But like, inherent in that comes the class discussion, because again, the only white people that could stick around were those who were upper middle class, and so that definitely comes through the whole thing. But I think still calling that class white just forces an attention to recognize, like, yeah, no matter how progressive you are, no matter how many ethnic friends you have, you know what I mean, no matter how many like ethnic menus you can order off in the actual language, whatever, I can still put a list out of all the things that you like, and people will recognize it as white. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how you try, it's still, because that still says class, power, money, all of that stuff is still white. And so that was one of the things that came out of it. It was sort of a great subtle message that definitely wasn't intended, but it is definitely running throughout everything that I wrote. Anybody else? Yeah.
What's Mr.
Tight glasses, man.
Oh, thanks. What's Mr. O'Connell think of the new book?
I don't know yet. We kind of lost touch.
Really?
I wasn't going to push it, you know what I mean? And then he has some kids, and it's like, it's probably kind of weird now. You know what I mean? Like, to bring it up again. So hopefully he likes it.
Why don't you text him?
Fingers crossed. No, that'd be so weird. It'd be too weird. Yeah.
The television show, did it ever air?
No, we didn't even shoot it.
It can't.
Died in development. We wrote the script, submitted the script, and then Fox was like, we're going to do a show about a brewery. And I was like, love you, television. But yeah, we didn't even get to shoot it, which is a bummer. I was really looking forward to like shooting it and casting, going through all that stuff would have been a lot of fun, but no dice. But it was a really good process, really fun.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for having me out here.